Hello friends, welcome back. Dr. Larry Mitnaul here, child and adolescent psychiatrist. Welcome to this second part of my talk on online safety for kids. If you've not seen the first part, have no fear. You can watch it just after this one. The first half will help you to better understand some of the trends that are going on online and the use among kids these days, and you'll get ideas to help you reevaluate how your kids are really connecting online. So watching to the end of this video will give you some resources you can use to help protect your children and tips for having these all-important conversations. Stronger, savvy parents can raise really strong, resilient kids. So sit back, relax, and just before you grab that drink, hit the like button. I know, it's a small thing, but honestly, it actually helps us to reach and strengthen more families by letting YouTube know that this message of hope is certainly worth sharing. Really, that's all you gotta do. So thanks for joining the mission. Now, let's get to it.
And so we monitor where our kids go, who they play with, what shows they watch, what books they read or magazines are on their shelves. And so, more, not less, level of vigilance is going to be required, I think, to help us to manage our kids' online presence and how they access it. An internet in which, the safe and good and interesting are often paired pretty close to the unsavory things. All right, so before going on to some of the other things about having the conversation and things to look for, I'm gonna leave you with a couple of stories taken from my experience. Now, obviously, the details are changed so that I don't violate both my oath and license and the law to disclose kind of real personal information. But these are infrequent conversations I might have with families, or that I might hear kind of in any given week. And so I kind of want you to reflect what it might be like kind of sitting with, talking to, or having in your home, this kid or teen. So I want you to imagine with me a depressed teen who's really smart. So, but maybe they're struggling with, some self confidence. Maybe their interest in other things have been low. And then obviously you situate them in a time like our own where they've really been alone and kind of stranded without a friend to be beside them. And so imagine that, they're looking for a community of support, friends, and maybe they get, and they find that in a chat room online. And say within this group of people, there is a person, there's really a screen name, right? Who has only disclosed what they want to disclose, who's also maybe struggling with depression. And so perhaps that's the link, right? That's the link for friendship, that often our shared suffering, brings us closer together. But imagine this mildly depressed teen spending night after night after night chatting with this friend, and then the chat turns to sharing cell phone numbers so that they can talk and provide comfort and general consolation to one another. And then imagine this teen getting sucked kind of deeper and deeper in to basically being an on-call therapist for this person that he's met online. Excuse me. And then that person coming to seek care, either in the office of his therapist or psychiatrist. And when asked about the gains that they had made in terms of improving the way they feel about themselves, their action in the world, and that one of the things they disclose to you is that what's been eating them up inside and maybe sabotaging their progress has been the pressure of having this friend who's struggling online, who's leaning on them and maybe sharing with them information that they don't know what to do with or how to seek help for them. So that's one vignette. And again, we might return to this too in reflecting on conversations that we might have with our kid, but I'll give you one more vignette. So imagine a 7-year-old kid who also is really bright and maybe just enjoys playing on his Xbox. And again, like all of our quarantine kids, but even without the quarantine, sometimes parents are picking up in this conversation a word or two that don't sound like the language that they use in their own home. And then maybe he's becoming more kind of preoccupied with, violence or sexual material that that really, is disconcerting. So they search around, and perhaps they haven't found kind of the source of it. I mean, they looked in the traditional places like, on their, family computer, on the cell phone or the old iPod Touch that he might use just to access a few kind of learning apps and other things, right? And so imagine that this child comes to their parents one day asking, Mom, Dad, can you give me our address? I don't know our address. And so the parents ask, well, why do you need our address? Well, I want to send someone a message. Or I want to write my friend, my pen pal, or a buddy from school a letter, and I want to put our return address, but I just don't know it. I just don't know it by memory. And so imagine this family coming in and discussing both, this radical shift in the child's behavior over the last, several months, and then later learning that, the story that he told about sharing information with a real in-person friend that he's hoping to connect with turns out to be, an adult or another person kind of impersonating a real friend who was requesting information like the parents' credit card numbers. So again, I think hearing some of these stories, I hope that you've kind of sensed it's a scary position for the parent, right? Imagining yourself kind of dealing with this with your child and almost having the sense that that same feeling that someone has either violated or broken into your home and tampered with your kids or your most prized possession, except they were able to do it without fingerprints. They were able to do it without breaking any locks. Instead, they were creeping in, the bedroom through the screens of their child or and the things that they were engaging in. All right, so what are so I extolled all the positive things. So to bring it full circle, some of the positive things, but what are some of the concerns? So, and those vignettes kind of highlighted them. So being exposed to online information that promotes hate, that promotes violence, pornography. Kids get entangled in being invited to register for prizes if they only offer personal household information to an unknown, but they feel familiar with source online. There's also the very real concern that I often see about kids losing time from developing real in-person social connections and skills, and having some of the screen and online things take away from their formation of their physical activity and exercise. And there's also the kids revealing too much about themselves too that they can't take back on social media, and then also the bullying thing. So again, I think you're getting a sense of the gravity of it and just how easy it is for kids to kind of slip into that. And I think sometimes the most heartbreaking stories arise from kids using an app or getting on a website that's also presented as kid friendly, right? All right, so ways to begin thinking about, or that I often will encourage parents to think about in determining their philosophy, their kind of rule of life for how to do screens, how to moderate them in their own life. And so I apologize if some of it sounds a little bit philosophical, but I think it'll be, for many, if you spend the time doing it, I think a pillar or framework for figuring out what's going to be our take and how are we going to measure these things in our own home and moderate them so that our kids aren't more vulnerable. So a couple of questions for yourself might be, what are the actual needs of my child regarding education and socialization? For us, in terms of the social connections for our kids, what is primary? So is our primary identity as a family, our relationships with one another, or are we in a stage of life for this child or another child where a lot of their identity is wrapped up in kind of their social orbit or how they're connected to other kids. How do we determine the range and type of independence that we want in our kids, and giving them the type of independence that really their skills and their development allow them to pursue without putting them at grave risk? Do we know the limits of the technology and the apps on our kids' current phones? Can my son talk to people through an innocuous and free game like Super Mario Brothers Run? Which the answer is actually yes. which I was actually surprised at, and I don't, I'm not going to scoff at Nintendo. I grew up a Nintendo kid and enjoying those games. But then I was so surprised to find that why is there a social chat feature kind of baked into the game when my 5 or 6 year old who I want to just have a little bit of tech fun with could easily get kind of sidetracked. Well, hopefully they're great readers, I guess, if they're 4 or 5 years old, but can get sidetracked onto something that's unsavory or not good for them. And so just a couple of questions to just continue to ask, kind of starting broadly about, as a family, what are the things that we prioritize? And if, you're a family that puts, education as the primary, okay, what are going to be the appropriate outlets? And then maybe drilling down deeper, what are the safeguards that we want to put in place to allow our kids to access those things safely? And so the other thing that can be sobering is asking, and I can ask you this question too. You've probably had the experience of obviously being a kid in your parents' home, and perhaps you, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. You were the brainiac who basically taught the family how to record from one VHS recorder to the other, or perhaps you're the one who showed your parents how to burn MP3s to a blank CD, or maybe you taught your parents how to upload to the cloud. All right. So what is the take-home message from that? Well, the take-home message that I'm hoping you hear is that your kids are probably better than you, right? They're probably better than you, or even if they aren't, the lag time from being a novice to an expert at a lot of these technologies and our digital devices are really steep, and they're really good at it. And so if they're not better than us, they soon will be. All right, so what are my ideas for protections and things that we can think about in helping to create a safe environment for our kids? So obviously the usual suspects are the things that you'll hear most often. So looking at the browser settings, setting time limits, making sure that you have kind of parental controls on the things that you can control, so the iPad or the cell phone or whatever it is that they're using. Limiting access, and thinking about what is the ratio in our homes of phones per children, right? And then being able to talk to your kids about what the very clear rules and expectations are around cell phone use, especially as they get older. And then supervision with technology, and lastly, I'll highlight, I think our relationship with our kids is in many ways a protective factor. And so, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, that being attached, being close, being able to discuss kind of anything and everything, and having the time and ability to do that and to go there with them, are also one of the protective kind of strategies. Again, there are variations in this theme with kind of those kind of core things, but I think teaching kids those skills, having those very open conversations, and pitching it to their developmental level can be really helpful. So there are some good books out there too that talk about this. Again, I'm gonna on my website too, I'll have some book recommendations, but there are books about both, there's a book series called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures that has a helpful way for kids and for parents to enter into a conversation together. I think often the dinner table or wherever it is that you guys are working together, making slime, or playing Monopoly, or just even maybe before family movie night. I think there's some really easy questions too that can lead to the conversation of figuring out what our kids know. And so one way to approach it is, rather than begin with the lecture, because often the lecture kind of leads to, closed eyes and mouths and I don't have any questions and moving on to the next topic. Often I like to begin with questions. So, while we're sitting side by side with a, bowl of Cheetos between us, okay, what would you do if someone asked for your help online with something that, you didn't feel qualified or able to, to help them with? What would you do if someone shared a picture with you that, that was really, surprising or confusing, or actually that was really interesting and made you feel, a funny, maybe a funny or a unique kind of way? What would you do with that? Or what would you do if you encountered somebody in real life, or encountered someone on the computer who asked you to do something, but then told you not to tell? And so in many ways, right, a lot of the things I've just mentioned are the conversations that, again, that you've probably already been having to some degree about, stranger danger. And so a lot of that translation, we want to encourage that to continue, especially about the online presence of our kids. And so lastly, I'll probably just pause here so that, we can get into the question and answer, because I think that may be more beneficial than just me kind of rattling on. I'm gonna, there's actually a phrase from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which I absolutely agree with. And I just wanted to share with you guys too, because I think it's humbling, and it's helpful for me to hear, both as a parent and as a clinician. And so the quote is this, that parents should remember that, communicating online does not prepare children for real interpersonal relationships. Okay? So again, parents should remember that communicating online does not prepare children for real interpersonal relationships. Spending time with a child, initially exploring an online service, and periodically participating with the child in the online experience gives parents an opportunity to monitor and supervise the activity. And so what is that calling for? I think it's just reminding us, and I love the way that it's phrased, that there are so many, unique challenges in our world that our parents, never had to face or contend with. And so that's made parenting in this century, I think, harder in some ways than it has been in the past. Now, don't tell your grandparents I said that, or your parents, but I think it is true. And so there's so much to being able to model good response and being a good steward of the resources that we have, of using tools appropriately. And so I think if we can move to a model where, we treat our kids, ability to access online closer to, the use of a lawnmower. Okay, so, it's wonderful and it works, and it's really cool to hear the engine rev. And it's going to be important for us to talk about safety, not just once, but make it part of an ongoing conversation, so that you get the fruits and benefits of using the tool without the things that make it a big risk, and ultimately limiting to our children's future. So with that said, I as I promised, I'm gonna pause here, and hopefully we can open it up and have a discussion about, your thoughts